SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome. We will continue with the assessing the heritage significance, the concept and process part 2. In the last lecture, we have talked about the significance and what are the different steps for and the variations for the making the statement of significance. We will continue with the process. We ended at that how to use the criteria. So, again we have discussed many times this connection. I will just recap. Consistent set of criteria for assessing items and collections creates comparable assessment across all kinds of collection. This collection again I am mentioning, it can be a sculpture, a manuscript, a building, a structure, an artifact, it can be many things which can be of value. So, a consistent set of criteria for assessing items and collection creates comparable assessment. So, you have to understand what is this comparable assessment. We also have to understand there has to be a framework to elucidate and describe how and why the item is important. So, how to evolve that framework and use the criteria to draw out the precise quality of the item or collection's significance rather than simply assert that it is, for example, historically significant. As again and again I am saying, just saying historically significant is not enough. One has to understand what are the qualities, precisely the items that which contribute to the historical significance. Otherwise, we cannot go to the next stage. The assessment against the criteria. So, we have to have the criteria, then the assessment has to be done against the criteria. This assessment against the criteria fits into the statement of significance. We have discussed that in our last lecture, helping to synthesize the meanings and values of the items and connections. So, this is absolutely important to get hold of this concept of the values and significance. Now, while we do that, there are primary criteria. In the primary criteria and there is a comparable criteria. So, let us see what are the primary criteria. Primary criteria we have discussed with various examples. It can be of historic significance, it can be artistic or aesthetic significance, it can be scientific or research significance, and it can be social or spiritual significance. So, the many times these are the broad category of the primary criteria, which can sort of contribute the significance and values, only one of that or combination of that. Now, let us talk about historic significance. When these are a sort of a checklist which I will go through quite quickly, that what it means to be the historic significance. For example, is it associated with a particular person, group, event or place or activity, or is it associated with the activity and how is this important? What does it say about an historic theme or a process or a pattern of life? It can be one singular event, or it can be a pattern of life, or it can be a thematic based, or how does it contribute to understanding a period, a place, activity or industry or a person or an event. So, this is a quick checklist of the historic significance. Now, example, let us take an example. Is it associated with a particular person, group, event or place? Now, this is example of Chatim Tala in Vishwabharati Shantiniketan. This is a Chatim tree and this is in a landscape area, open area, which is a very important place for the entire running of the soul of Vishwabharati Shantiniketan, which is the Tagore's university, which he established there and still running as a central university. Now, this is just a tree, and under the tree there is a sitting arrangement, and this is placed. Now, why it is important? This is important, as I say, it is because this is the place where Gurudev's father sort of did a meditation. It is very important there, and it is spiritually, but it is also important because this is the main soul and the heart of Vishwabharati, where as you can see when Gandhiji and Kasturba came, we can see a scene that they were sitting there. This is also the place where Nehru, because when he was the chancellor or Upacharya of Vishwabharati, he came and gave there. It is all happening in that place. So, it is associated with the person, it is associated with the event. That place is very important. This Chatim Tola is also important, continue to be important in the life of on the activities of Vishwabharati, because this is where the convocation takes place. And as you can see that the convocation is happening there, and the dignitaries are coming, Upacharya and other, and there is a very significance, because in the convocation time they give the degree as a symbolic thing with the leaves of Chatim, which is Shaptapurni, or the 7 leaves of Chatim. So, that is a very spiritual significance. So, this place is important and continue to important for the activity and the event of Vishwabharati. What does it say about historic theme, process, or a pattern of life? So, as a place it is important because of the association of the spiritual significance, the activity which is happening, but independently also it is a part of a larger whole. It is a larger whole because this, as I say, is the soul of that campus. It is based on Gurudev's idea or philosophy of rendering an education system based on our traditional Vedic ashram, that Indian traditional system. So, the classes and everything used to happen in the open, still it happens in the open, and you can see that the students are sitting, the classrooms are organized around a tree. So, these Chatim Tola, which is the soul of this place, it actually represents a process and a pattern of life, which is actually a nature journey. And how does it contribute to the understanding of the period place? Because once we understand Chatim Tola, which as I say is the soul of the place, we can understand that how the culture nature journey is a very important part of this entire working activity foundation of Vishwabharati and its lifestyle. So, this Chatim Tola is very important, and its significance is not only a tree, not only a place, not only an event, but it has a larger significance. So, one has to understand that historic significance from the various aspects. Next, we come to the artistic or aesthetic significance. Again a checklist. Is it well designed, crafted, or made? Is it a good example of a style, design, artistic, or movement of an artistic work? For example, an artist maybe in the later life became a very matured work, but in the initial stage his or her work can be important. It can be an architect's work. In a mature state he or she produced a very beautiful structure, but he started with something which is very rudimentary, which shows how his work has evolved. So, is it a good example of a style? It can be a style which we are talking about and how the style has evolved. So, is it a good example of a style, design, artistic movement, or even an artist's work? Is it original or innovative in the design? So, I mean it may not be always very beautiful or a very matured work, but it can be very innovative and very original in its contribution. Is it beautiful, pleasing, or well proportioned? I am taking the example of Gandhi by Ramkinkar Bej, taken from Shantiniketan. That Ramkinkar Bej is a sculptor who was from a very tribal background, and he was trained, and Gurudev gave him a lot of freedom to work in his own medium and his own style. And this is a sculpture, there are many more, and by Gandhi by Ramkinkar. So, it is one hand it is the person for whom it is the sculpture is made, and the person who made it, the sculptor, and also the material he used, the style he has used. So, it is very important. It does not mean it always has to be very beautiful, but it is also there can be various things that how it can be a very innovation. There are many structures or sculptures in Shantiniketan where Ramkinkar Bej experiment with material concrete and iron and made a sculptures. They are creating a lot of problem to preserve them, but that we will see later on. So, this is very important that when we talk about the artistic and aesthetic significance, does not mean always it has to be just beautiful or pleasing to look like. There can be various ways of understanding the artistic and the aesthetic significance. Again, I am continuing with the checklist of the under this. Does it show a high degree of creative or technical accomplishment? Does it depict a subject, a person, place, activity or an event of interest or importance? For example, where was that originally placed? Does it, that location is important? Did it sort of experiment with some material or technique? This criterion is most relevant to works of art, craft, design and decorative arts, but may also apply to items of technology or mineral specimens or folk work. So, this artistic aesthetic significance either can be a small piece of object or can be a structure or can be a building or can be a painting, can be anything. So, it has a larger connotation and one has to see that in relation to all these aspects. Just beautiful is not the only thing what we are looking into the artistic and aesthetic significance. Do not have to be artworks to have the artistic value. I mean any other item also can be artistically significant. Some pictures may have little artistic significance, but may have a historic value instead. So, one has to see that what are the various connotation when we look under the broad category of the artistic and the aesthetic significance. Comes the third category, scientific or research significance. If you remember, we talked about Jantar Mantar and all these structures under this. Let us see what can be the different checklist for this category. Do researchers have an active interest in studying the item or collection today, or will they want to in the future? How is it of interest or of value for science or research today or in the future? Is it of research potential in what? What things in particular constitute is scientific or research interest and the research value. So, these comes under the scientific and the research significance. This is almost like a checklist. Let us take one example. I am taking the example of the wheel at Konark temple. We will talk in detail of Konark temple later on, because the concept of Konark temple is the chariot of sun god, and so there are the wheels and the horses are dragging the temple. This was the concept. Now, there are wheels all around on the plinth of the temple, and these wheels they have been restored in parts, and there is a they are beautiful to look at, and there are very fine curvings on that. But very recently people have been working on that, and they found that this wheel, all the wheels which are there on the different position of the on the foundation or the plinth of the Konark temple, each of this wheel is very different in their finer curvings, and they are just not representing the wheels of the chariots of the sun god, but each one of them is also scientifically important. Why? Because it shows exactly the timing. So, it is almost the finer divisions, and why they are each and every things depending on their position and different position of the sun when he is traversing in the sky in the different season. So, each of this wheel is very important to understand the time to the minute second scale. So, this is very important for the scientific, and people are still trying to understand that and got some idea that how it represent that what are the finer divisions, and these are just not mere curvings on the stone, but each and every curving, each and every division has a meaning to represent the time of that particular time of the year. So, this is that is why it is not only a sculpture, it is not only aesthetics, but it is also important because of the scientific significance, and still it is contributing to understanding that what was our traditional knowledge system. We come to the next broad aspect, which is the social or the spiritual significance. I begin going back to Shantiniketan because it is easier to relate the various objects. It is the Bashant Utsav in Shantiniketan. They have all the religious festivals in Shantiniketan with the nature. It is very important that it celebration of the nature, celebration, and through the songs and dances and different rituals and other things, which is, and everybody takes part in that. Now, it is a very important festival which attract tourists from all over the places, various parts. So, now when we are talking about the social or spiritual significance, is it of a particular value to a community or a group today? Why is it important to them? We can see that every year during the Holi and the spring festival, it is being celebrated through colors, through dance, through songs, other. And how is this demonstrated? When we talk about a festival which is of a social and spiritual significance, we have to find out how is this demonstrated, how this item is kept in the public eye, or its meaning kept alive for a group. For example, by use of an annual parade or ceremonies, in this case it is a ceremony or a festival, or by maintaining the traditional practices surrounding the item. And please remember that again this also goes through a revolutionary process. There are bound to be some changes in the performance, some will be the traditional and some will be the innovative ideas, because culture is a continuum and this dynamic process will happen. And this one has to understand when talking about that. So, a Bashant Utsav or the spring festival or Holi is one such festival in Shantiniketan. I will also talk about other festival. Has the community been consulted about its importance for them? So, here comes the involvement of the community, having a ritual or event which has been there, and whether it is being still continuing and how the community reacts to that. This is a very interesting example of a Rash in Cooch Behar, which is a very significant. Cooch Behar is a place in the northern part of Bengal, and which is known for its ruling dynasty, and this particular Rash is a very unique in its concept. I will talk about that. So, let us take the checklist. Is it of spiritual significance for a particular group? And is the spiritual significance found in the present time? And does it embody beliefs, ideas, customs, traditions, practices or stories that are important for a particular group? So, let us see what is this. Just take an example of Rash in Cooch Behar. You can see that structure. This is called Rash Thunder. So, on the day of the Rash, it is in the temple complex, Madan Mohan temple complex, where it is made like that. And who makes it? Because there is no other similar example anywhere for celebrating Rash in a similar style. What is this? It is a sort of a structure which is made of very fine paper cuttings. Who makes that? It is made by a Mohammedan craftsman, and who has been doing that? Their whole entire family, from his grandfather, his father, and he is doing that. He only knows that, and he does that, and he designs that, cuts the paper in a very fine mesh thing. This is a very fine example of a craft, and that is hosted there, and then on that particular day it has to be sort of rotated, and earlier the king used to rotate that, and now the district magistrate who is performing or the role of the king there. So, he sort of starts the function by rotating, and everybody comes and sort of rotates that. So, this is a festival. Now, see, there is a lot of things that it is still, people believe that still the family which has been doing that, have been doing in a very follows for a certain period a very strict vegetarian diet, and he does it almost like a prayer and does it a very pure way, and he believes that this is his sort of a prayer to the Madan Mohan things. So, you see that, and then what has been there, and this has been some change, but the community still celebrates that, and still this is being continued. So, these are the example which is of a social and the spiritual. So, it has got a spiritual significance, it also has got a social significance, because still people come there and a lot of people come and sort of moves that, and still that beautiful curving of the paper and craft which is continuing. So, now we have talked about the primary criteria. Let us talk about the comparative criteria. In the comparative criteria, one is the provenance, then I will just talk about the rarity or representativeness, condition or completeness, and interpretive capacity. Because what happens once we know this individual sort of a criteria, we also have to, when we say that, there can be many examples of that. So, how do we assess that this is important? So, these are the 4 aspects which are known as the comparative criteria. The statement of purpose has to be done accordingly. So, let us see what is provenance. Provenance, this includes the family memorabilia, photographs, furniture, or any item cherished as a part of the family's history, or it can be a country's history, it can be a community's history. So, any object which is cherished. So, what are the things as a checklist? Is it well documented or recorded for its class or type? Who created, made or owned or used the item or the collection? Is its place of origin well documented? Where did it origin? How it also changed hands? If it is, there is a chain of ownership. Is the provenance reliable? We have to understand that whether we have the documents of that. How does the provenance shape the significance of the item or the collection? The first thing which came to my mind when I was talking about the provenance is a very common example, which is a Kohinoor. Kohinoor in India, which is now is actually on the crown of the British monarchy, it passed many hands. It is a long history there, and from Maharaja Ranjit Singh, how it came there, how it changed hands, and how it came and how it is kept there. So, there is a thing. So, we know that it is significant because not only is there on the crown, but it is history, how it has changed hand, from where it went and what is the importance. So, I am talking a very important, it is not only value because it is a very valuable piece of diamond, but its value comes from very other things. So, it is the provenance. I will take a very not so sort of well known example. As I said that these are the very things. So, it can be a piece of art also, like painting by Jamini Roy. Recently, I made a sort of a friend of mine, his family has inherited a painting by Jamini Roy, and he said the signature of the Jamini Roy is there. It is a very important piece of their family heritage, and now it has to be proved. So, there are experts who sort of sees that whether it is authentic, and then they give a certificate whether signature is authentic. So, then it becomes a very significant example of an art. So, this way this is which comes on the provenance. The rarity or representativeness, does it have unusual qualities that distinguish it from other items in the class or the category? Is it unusual or a particularly fine example of its type? Because in one type there can be many structures, examples, photographs, paintings and other whatever typology you talk about. Now, one has to, when we are talking about that, it has to talk about the rarity and how well it sort of represents that particular typology or criteria. Is it singular, unique or endangered? Is it a good example of its type or class? Is it typical or characteristic? Is it particularly well documented for its class or group? So, all of these are a sort of a checklist to understand the rarity or the representativeness of this particular item. Taking the example of Jor Bangla temple of Bishnupur at Terracotta, it is a very specific type of temple where the twin hut style of temples are there, and there are many examples of Jor Bangla temple, but it is all over. It is in Bangladesh, many places of West Bengal and some in Bihar also we see example of Jor Bangla temple. So, how do we see that, or how do we say, or how do we establish that this Jor Bangla temple, this particular Jor Bangla temple is important, because it is not rarity, it is representing a particular typology that has to be established, that how well it sort of represents a particular typology. For example, as I told, there are other examples of Jorbangla temple in various places. As you can see from there, this is not so important, not so beautiful, not so, it does not have so much of curving. It is a small example of Jorbangla. So, one has to establish with proper justification that the Bishnupur Jorbangla temple, and there can be few more others where they are more important, more significant, and they are fine examples of a particular typology of the Jorbangla temple. Condition or completeness, that what stage this is. Is it in good condition for its type? Is it in intact or complete, or it is partly in ruins or damage? Does it show the repairs, alterations or evidence of the way it was used? Is it still working, or it is still being used, or is it sort of unused? All the questions have to be answered, and is it in original undisturbed condition? So, as we can see that again from Bishnupur, the Shamrai temple in Bishnupur, there is a terracotta things which is the Raj Chakra depicted in the Shamrai temple. You can see that it is almost no damage has been done except some moss and fungus and other things. It is a beautiful example, it sort of depicts the mythology, that event, and absolutely wonderful example, an unique example of this terracotta style. But in the same complex you can see that there are other murals also, they are also beautiful, but there have been some parts which has been changed because they have been damaged so much, they have been replaced by the plain thing. So, that naturally the value of this will be, or significant will be more than this. So, one has to sort of explain that in that. Interpretive capacity, how is it relevant to the organization mission, purpose, collection policy and program. So, one is representing an organization or a community or a state, that how it is able to interpret that. Does it have a special place in the collection in relation to other items or collection theme? Does it help to interpret aspect of the place or the concept, as we say the Mujiris we have talked about, or Bishnupur we have talked about, or Shantiniketan, Vishwabharati we have talked about. Now, again we are going to the Bishnupur, that where Radhasham temple in Bishnupur there, this is the one tower or single tower which is called Ekratnu temple, but there are many other also there. So, probably as there are many more examples, when we sort of, if we prepare for the nomination dossier or for the World Heritage Sites, we will talk later on. So, we have to select the one which is the most significant, which is most in a complete way it can narrate the story or represent it, it is a representing example of that particular style. So, you have to understand that when we talk about the interpretive capacity. The Raj Chakra, what we have seen in the terracotta, this also was have an interpretive category because it is talking about the mythology. So, what when you take the summary of the statement of significance, the statement of significance is a reasoned, readable summary of the values, meaning and the importance of an item or collection. It is more than a description of what the item or the collection looks like. It is not a catalogue of description. So, one has to understand what is a catalogue of description and versus the statement of significance. A statement of significance summarizes how and why the collection or item is important. It is supported by research and evidence assembled through the assessment process. So, this is in a summary that what is the statement of significance is, and why prepare a statement of significance: to summarize the meaning, to communicate the meanings to the users and the audience, to enhance and access to and use of collections, example online, to facilitate the debate, discussion and understanding of the item or collection, to synthesize knowledge and ideas about the item or collection, to ensure that the provenance and association of items and collections are fully recorded as a reference point when considering how best to conserve and manage the item, so that its important values and attributes are preserved. It is very important. We have to come back again and again to this statement of significance to understand what should be done. So, it is basically it is in an argument about how and why an item or collection is of value. So, we have discussed what are the different types of value criteria, the process, and how the statement of significance and what is important. And so, finally, if you summarize, understand the significance before making decisions about items and collection. So far we have talked about value, significance, the process of making. So, next we will go about that what are the different approaches and ways of keeping, preserving these values and significance. Thank you.